The invoice sat on the edge of the table like something that had been placed there deliberately, not slid over, not handed to me politely, placed. The way you place something in front of someone when you already know they're going to pick it up. I looked at it for a moment before I touched it. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping it would disappear. Maybe I was still waiting for my son to come back inside and say, "Mom, don't worry, I've got this." But the door had already closed behind him. I could hear the muffled sound of a car engine idling somewhere in the parking lot, and I was sitting alone at a table that had held 23 people 20 minutes ago. The total was $9,340. Let me back up, because the story doesn't start there. It never starts at the worst moment, even though that's the moment you keep returning to in your head for weeks afterward, turning it over like a stone you keep finding in your shoe. My name is Veronica. I'm 64 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom house in Asheville, North Carolina, that I bought myself 11 years ago, after my husband Raymond passed. I have a small garden out back. I grow tomatoes every summer, and I have one of those hummingbird feeders that never works as well as the box promises. I worked for 31 years as an office administrator for a medical group here in town. I retired 2 years ago with a pension that covers my bills if I'm careful, and some savings I've been adding to slowly since Raymond died. I am not a wealthy woman. I am a comfortable woman. There is a difference, and that difference matters to this story. My son is 37. His name is Derek. He married a woman named Suzanne 6 years ago, and they live in Charlotte, about 2.5 hours from me. Suzanne has a large family. A very large family. I mean that in the numerical sense. She has 4 siblings, each of whom seems to have married someone with 3 or 4 siblings of their own, and every holiday or gathering turns into a small convention. I had met some of them at the wedding. I had met a few more at Derek and Suzanne's housewarming. But the truth is, I've never felt fully comfortable in that crowd. Not because they were unkind to me. They weren't. But there is a difference between being welcomed and belonging, and in 6 years of marriage, I had mostly hovered somewhere in between. Derek calls me on Sundays. Or he used to, before the calls started getting shorter and further apart. Last year, they dropped to every other Sunday. This year, by February, it was once a month. I stopped counting after that because counting made me feel like I was keeping score, and I didn't want to be the kind of mother who kept score. So when he called me on a Thursday evening in March and said he wanted to take me to dinner, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while. I felt wanted. "Just a small thing," he said. "Suzanne's cousin is in town, and we thought it'd be nice to get together. Nothing fancy. You'd love Asheville's new steakhouse, Copperline. You know it?" I did know it. I'd driven past it a few times. It looked nice. The kind of place with a hostess stand near the door and cloth napkins. "Just a few of us?" I asked. Yeah, he said. "Us, you, maybe her cousin and her husband. Small crowd." I said yes before he finished the sentence. I spent more time getting ready than I probably should have. I wore the navy dress I bought from my friend Helen's retirement party. I curled my hair. I even put on the pearl earrings Raymond gave me on our 25th anniversary, which I only bring out for things that feel like occasions. I wanted to look like someone Derek would be proud to sit next to. I arrived at Copperline at 7 on the dot. The hostess smiled and asked if I had a reservation. "Yes," I said, "probably under my son's name, Derek Whitmore." She scrolled on her tablet for a moment. "Whitmore, party of 24? I heard the number. I let it sit in my ear for a moment. "I'm sorry," I said. "How many?" 24, she said, still smiling. "Right this way." She led me through the restaurant toward a private dining area in the back that I hadn't even known existed. The doors were already open and the room was full of voices and laughter and the smell of bread and something braised and expensive. I stood at the doorway and I counted without meaning to, the way you count things when your brain needs a moment to catch up with your eyes. There were people I recognized. Derek, Suzanne, a woman I vaguely remembered from the wedding. Suzanne's mother, I thought. And then there were people I had never seen before in my life. A man in a sport coat who was telling a very loud story at the far end of the table. Two young women sharing a phone, laughing at something on the screen. An elderly couple sitting quietly near the window. A man in his 40s with the build of someone who had played college football and never quite let go of that identity. Derek saw me and waved. "Mom, you made it. Come sit down." I walked to him. I leaned in and hugged him, and he patted my back twice, the way you pat a colleague on the back when you're glad they came to the meeting. "I thought you said small," I said quietly, not accusingly. "Just noting." He laughed. "It grew. You know how it is." Once Suzanne's aunt heard we were getting together, and then her brother's family drove up from Colombia. It just kind of happened. It just kind of happened. 24 people at a steakhouse, and it just kind of happened. I sat down next to a woman who introduced herself as Brenda. She was Suzanne's cousin's college roommate, she explained. I nodded and smiled and picked up the menu and tried to calculate how much my own meal was going to cost, as if that was still the only number I needed to worry about. The dinner took 2 hours. I won't say it was unpleasant, because pieces of it weren't. Brenda was actually funny, in the dry way that some women get when they've survived enough to stop being polite about everything. We talked about Asheville, about the way it had changed in the last decade, about the restaurants that had come and gone on Lexington Avenue. But I spent most of the dinner feeling like a guest at someone else's party, which I was. Derek barely spoke to me. He was at the other end of the table, deep in conversation with Suzanne's brother, and the man I assumed was Suzanne's brother's business partner. Suzanne moved around the table like a host, touching shoulders, laughing at things, refilling glasses. She stopped by me once and said, "Veronica, are you having fun?" in a way that felt like she was checking a box. I ordered the salmon, $28. I had a glass of wine, $14. I was conscious the whole time of staying within what I could reasonably absorb if something shifted, because I had felt from the moment I walked into that room something I couldn't quite name, a low hum, like the feeling before a storm, when the sky hasn't changed, but the air has. People ordered freely. I watched the man in the sport coat order a second appetizer before his first one arrived. I watched Suzanne's mother order a seafood platter that I would later see listed on the bill at $86. I watched Derek order a ribeye and a bourbon and then a second bourbon without looking at the price. None of them reached for the menu and calculated. None of them paused. And I understood, in the way you understand things that you'd rather not, that they weren't going to. Around 9 o'clock, people started gathering their jackets and saying goodbye. The goodbyes took another 20 minutes because there were 24 people and everyone felt the need to hug everyone else. I stood near my chair and watched the room empty. Derek helped Suzanne's mother with her coat. He shook hands with the man in the sport coat. He kissed Suzanne on the cheek. And then he came to me. "Mom." He put a hand on my shoulder. "It was so good to see you. Hey, listen, we're going to head out and get the car. It's cold out and Suzanne forgot her sweater, so we're just going to grab it from the trunk. They'll bring the check in a minute." I looked at him. "They'll bring the check," I said. "Yeah, they know how to process it, it's fine. Just hand them your card and we'll get it sorted later, okay?" "I'll Venmo you." He said it the way you say something you've rehearsed enough times that it sounds almost casual. "I'll Venmo you." Like we were splitting a pizza. Before I could answer, he was already moving toward the door. Suzanne was already through it. I stood in the private dining room of Copperline Steakhouse in Asheville, North Carolina, wearing Raymond's pearl earrings, and I was alone. The server came in 3 minutes later. He was young, maybe 25, with a kind face and the practiced expression of someone who had delivered checks to many uncomfortable situations before. "Whenever you're ready," he said, setting the leather folder on the edge of the table. I want to tell you that I opened it calmly. I didn't. My hands were steady, because I've always had steady hands, but the rest of me was doing something that I don't have a word for. Something between bracing and dissolving. $9,340. I closed the folder. I opened it again. I looked at the total the way you look at something you've read wrong and need to read again. $9,340. I sat with that number for a moment. I thought about my pension. I thought about the savings account I had been adding to carefully, $50 or $100 at a time. ever since Raymond died. I thought about the tomatoes in my garden, which I had planted because I liked having something growing. And then I thought, I didn't do this. I didn't plan this dinner. I didn't invite these people. I didn't order the seafood platter or the second bourbon or the appetizer that came before the other appetizer. I drove here alone. I sat next to a woman I had never met. I ordered salmon and 1 glass of wine. I thought about Derek's hand on my shoulder, the practiced, easy way he had said, "I'll Venmo you," the door closing behind him, the sound of the parking lot. I picked up my phone. I called him. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Derek's voice, cheerful and recorded, asking me to leave a message. I didn't leave a message. I sat there for another minute, maybe 2. The server hovered near the door, not watching me, but aware of me, the way good servers are. And then something happened inside me. Not a dramatic thing. Not a movie moment. It was quieter than that. It was the feeling of something finally being seen clearly, after a long time of choosing not to look. I had been a good mother. I had shown up. I had driven 2.5 hours on a Thursday night in March because my son called and said he wanted to see me. I had worn my pearl earrings, and I was sitting alone in an empty room with a $9,340 check and a phone that had just gone to voicemail. I flagged down the server. "Excuse me," I said. "I need to clarify something. I only ordered the salmon and 1 glass of Chardonnay. Can you separate my portion of the check?" He blinked, just slightly. "Of course," he said. He came back 5 minutes later with a separate itemized bill. $42. I paid it with my debit card. I added a 20% tip because the server had done nothing wrong and had, in fact, been quite kind. I put my card back in my wallet. I stood up, put on my coat, and I walked out of Copeline Steakhouse. Derek called me back at 9:47. I was already on I-26, heading home with the radio off because I needed to think in silence. "Mom, hey, sorry I missed you. Did they run the card okay?" "They ran my card," I said. "For my salmon and my wine." A pause. "What?" "I paid for my meal, Derek. I didn't pay for the rest of it." The pause this time was longer. "Mom, what are you?" "There were 24 people there. Someone had to. That someone was not me." "Okay, but you were the last one at the table because you left me there." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Look," he said, and his voice had shifted into the tone I had been hearing for about 3 years now, the tone that meant he was about to explain something to me, as though I were slightly hard of understanding. It wasn't a big deal. The whole dinner probably wasn't even. The restaurant can handle it. There's a process for Derek. My voice was very quiet. I find that I am quietest when I am most certain. I am 64 years old. I have a pension and a savings account that I have built carefully by myself since your father died. I drove to that restaurant tonight because you told me it would be a small dinner and I wanted to see you. I did not agree to pay $9,000 for 24 people I mostly don't know. Silence. $9,000, he said. $9,340. Before tip. I heard him exhale. I heard faintly Suzanne's voice in the background asking something. "Mom, okay. I'm sorry. I should have handled that differently." "Yes," I said, "you should have. I'll call the restaurant tomorrow and sort it out, okay? I'll take care of it." "Okay," I said. "We good?" I didn't answer that. I said good night and I drove home. He did not call the restaurant. I know, because I called him myself 2 days later, just to understand what had happened. The manager, a patient woman named Dana, told me that the table had been left with an outstanding balance, that they had tried to reach the reservation holder, Derek, and had not received a response, that they were in the process of resolving it through their internal process. She was very professional. I thanked her. I didn't say anything more. Derek texted me on Saturday. "Hey, tried to reach them. They said it was resolved. All good. I read it 3 times. I thought about what resolved meant, and who had done the resolving, and whether I was supposed to just accept that sentence and move on. I set my phone down. I went outside and watered my tomatoes. Here is what I did not do in the weeks that followed. I did not call Derek every day demanding answers. I did not send long emotional texts. I did not complain to Suzanne or to any of her family, none of whom I had a way to contact anyway. I did not tell myself I had been weak, but I did some things. The first thing I did was call my attorney, a woman I'd worked with when I bought my house. I told her I wanted to update some paperwork. My will, specifically. I had left everything to Derek. I had done it out of habit, out of love, out of the assumption that this is what mothers do. I changed it, not dramatically, not out of spite. But I gave a portion to my friend Helen, who has been there every time I've needed someone to sit with. I gave some to a local organization that helps elderly women in financial crisis. I had found them a few years ago when a colleague needed help, and I had never forgotten them. Derek remained in the will, but he was no longer the only one in it. The second thing I did was open a travel savings account. I had always wanted to see the Oregon coast. Raymond had promised we'd go, and then he was sick, and then he was gone, and somehow that trip had stayed on a shelf in my mind for 11 years, like something I was saving for later. I opened the account. I set up a small automatic transfer each month. Not much, but something. The third thing I did was stop calling Derek on Sundays. Not forever, not as a punishment. But I had been calling him or making myself available for his calls week after week and then month after month, adjusting my expectations each time the call got shorter or further apart. I had been doing the labor of keeping us connected, and he had been letting me do it. I stopped. 3 weeks went by. He called me on a Sunday in April. "Hey, Mom, haven't heard from you." "I've been busy," I said. "Yeah? Everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I said. "How are you?" We talked for 20 minutes. It was the longest conversation we'd had in over a year. He asked about my garden. He told me about a problem at work. He laughed at something I said. At the end, he said, "I miss you, Mom. I feel like we've been out of touch." "We have been," I said. "I'm sorry about the dinner thing," he said. "I'm sorry about the dinner thing," he said. "I handled that badly." "You did," I said. "I should have stayed. I don't know. I was trying to make everyone happy and I just didn't think." "I know," I said, and I meant it. I do know that about him. Derek has always been someone who moves fast and looks back later. I raised him. I watched it happen. I also know that I spent 37 years making excuses for that quality, calling it flexibility or spontaneity, when what I was really doing was absorbing the cost of it. Every time. "I'd like to come visit," he said. "Just the two of us, no crowd." "I'd like that," I said. He came on a Saturday in May. He drove himself, no Suzanne, and he arrived with flowers from a grocery store that he was slightly embarrassed about. "I was going to get nicer ones," he said, "but I was running late. I put them in a vase anyway. They were yellow, and they look nice on my kitchen table." We sat on my back porch, and I made coffee, and we watched a hummingbird spend 10 minutes trying to figure out the feeder that never works right. Derek laughed every time it bounced off and tried again. "Stubborn little guy," he said. "He comes every day," I said. "I don't have the heart to take it down." We talked for 4 hours. We talked about Raymond, which we almost never do. We talked about Derek's childhood, about a camping trip we took when he was 8 that neither of us had thought about in years. He told me things about his marriage that I won't repeat here because they belong to him, not to me. I told him things about being lonely that I hadn't said out loud to anyone. At some point in the afternoon, he looked at me and said, "Mom, I really am sorry. Not just for the dinner. For everything. I've been selfish." I thought about telling him it was fine. I have said it's fine so many times in my life that the words have nearly lost their shape. I didn't say it. "I know you're sorry," I said. "I need you to do something with that, though, not just feel it." He nodded. He was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" And that question was the thing I had been waiting to hear for longer than I knew. Not, "Are we good?" Not, "I'll handle it." Not a Venmo notification on my phone. Just, "What do you need from me?" I told him. Not everything, not all at once, but I told him that I needed him to show up, to call when he said he'd call, to treat me like someone whose time and money and feelings are worth considering, to let me be his mother without making me pay for the privilege. He listened. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. When he left that evening, he hugged me at the door for a long time. Not the two-pat kind. The real kind. I leave for the Oregon coast in September. I booked a small rental house right on the water outside Lincoln City for 10 days. I'll go by myself. I've never traveled alone before, and I find that I'm not afraid of it. I find, in fact, that I'm looking forward to it in the specific way you look forward to something that belongs entirely to you. I've been watering my tomatoes. I fixed the hummingbird feeder. Turns out the perch was slightly loose, and once I tightened it, the little bird figured it out within a day. He comes every morning now. He's gotten confident. I think about that sometimes. How much of what we call stubbornness is just persistence, waiting for the right conditions. Derek and I talk on Sundays again. Sometimes he calls first. Sometimes I do. The calls are not always long, and they are not always easy, but they are honest in a way they haven't been in years. Suzanne sent me a card for my birthday in June. Just a card, nothing elaborate, but she signed it herself and wrote a real sentence inside, not just her name. I don't know if everything is fixed. I don't think families get fixed exactly. I think they get tended to, the way gardens do. You pull what isn't growing. You give water to what is. You accept that some years are harder than others, and some things don't come back, and some things surprise you. I watered my tomatoes this morning. The hummingbird came at 7:32, same as yesterday. The Oregon coast is 63 days away. I am 64 years old. I am not finished. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately, not in any grand philosophical way, just the quiet, practical kind you start to notice when you get to a certain age and you have enough distance to look back at things clearly. Derek didn't set out to hurt me that night at Copperline. I believe that. He's not a cruel person, but he did something that night that was the result of years of a pattern we had both built together, him and me, without ever naming it. He moved fast and assumed I would absorb whatever he left behind. And I had always absorbed it. Every time. So why would that night be any different? That's the thing about the choices we make quietly, over a long time. They don't announce themselves. They just accumulate. I spent years saying it's fine when it wasn't fine. Showing up when I wasn't asked. Covering what wasn't mine to cover. Not because anyone forced me, but because I had decided somewhere along the way that being needed was the same as being loved. It isn't. I know that now. What I did that night, paying for my salmon and walking out, was such a small thing. $42. A signature on a receipt, but the smallness of it was the point. I wasn't making a grand gesture. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was simply, for the first time in a very long time, telling the truth about what was mine and what wasn't. That kind of honesty, I've learned, has a way of rippling outward. Derek felt it. I could hear it in his voice when I told him the number on that check. He had never once stopped to calculate what he was leaving behind, and suddenly he had to. Integrity works like that, not loudly, not dramatically. It just holds its shape when pressure is applied, and the people around you feel it even when you don't say a word. I think about the woman I was before that dinner, driving 2.5 hours in a navy dress, wearing pearl earrings, hoping to be seen. I wasn't wrong to want that. The wanting wasn't the problem. The problem was that I had made myself so available, so accommodating, so endlessly absorbing, that I had disappeared a little. And when you disappear, people stop looking for you, not out of malice, just because you've taught them they don't need to. The most courageous thing I did in the months after that dinner wasn't changing my will or opening a travel savings account. It was stopping the phone calls, sitting with the silence and not filling it, letting Derek notice the absence. That took more out of me than any of the practical decisions, because I had to resist every instinct I built over 37 years of motherhood. But something grew in that silence, something honest. He came to me on a Saturday in May with grocery store flowers he was slightly embarrassed about, And we sat on my porch for 4 hours and talked like two people who were finally willing to tell the truth. That conversation didn't happen because I demanded it. It happened because I had stopped making it unnecessary. I leave for Oregon in September. The rental is right on the water. I've never traveled alone. I find that I'm not afraid of it at all. The hummingbird comes every morning now. I fixed the feeder. Turns out it just needed one small adjustment, and once I made it, everything worked the way it was supposed to. I think that's true of most things.